welcome to our humble home, and thanks for checking out the Sportsline podcast here on CHCH. I'm Bubba O'Neill. Hamilton, Halton, Niagara athletes, executives, and broadcasters are the focus, and one of our sports teams has finished the season short of expectation, while the other is yet again on the verge of something special. Name a pro or amateur club in the nation's capital, and this fella has covered it or called play-by-play. For over 2 decades, Edmonton native AJ Jakubec has been the voice of TSN 1200. Today, we get into what the Redblacks need to do to upset the Argos in the East Semi-Final, and on a local note, what Atlético Ottawa have up their sleeves for Hamilton's Forge FC and Sunday's CPL Semi-Final. Not a lot of time, but AJ, thanks for joining us. And I'm looking forward to catching up with you, partner.
Always a pleasure, Bubs. Always great chatting with you.
Hey, let's talk CPL first right out of the block. I'll tell you, I can't find too many places that are not calling for an upset. Why? And I say upset as in Atlético knocking off Forge.
Yeah, is either result an upset? I feel like, you know, if a York or a Pacific were to win the league, it would have been an upset. But to me, with the pedigree and the caliber of players and the coaches, for me, you know, it's 50-50. It was 50-50 when Cavalry was playing Forge last week. I feel like it's 50-50 for this game in Hamilton. And it's certainly 50-50 whoever wins going to Calgary next week. I think it's that close. Atop the CPL. You know, certainly Atlético Ottawa built a really strong roster in the offseason to try and challenge the likes of Cavalry and Forge, and I think they've done exactly that. They didn't finish very strong, but, you know, when you get a win in the manner that they did in their quarterfinal against York, where they're clearly the better team, but, you know, York found a way a couple of times to tie it after they took the lead, and you need penalties to advance. Sometimes that's the catalyst that a team like this might need. But, you know, on the other side, look, you know, I was calling the games in the PEI bubble in the Island Games in 2020. So I got to see Forge and Bobby Smirniotis work up close. And there's a reason that they've won 4 titles in 5 years. So it doesn't really matter to me who they put out on the pitch. They've got an identity. And they always seem to play the same way under Bobby Smirniotis. So with that group, that core that they've got, with, you know, led by Kyle Becker and Alexander Achinioti-Janssen and David Chouanier and Tristan Borges and the players that have been there, Cisse, for a while, you never count them out. And I feel like whoever scores the first goal is going to be in a real good spot. Doesn't mean that's game over, but I feel like whoever gets the jump early is going to have a real good opportunity to finish and go to Calgary.
And I think that's what surprised so many about Forge's loss to Cavalry, is that they got a little loose defensively and allowed just one of the wackiest goals you would ever expect. I think one of the things that's also a fear, and Forge have been good at home for the most part all season long, is that Atlético have had some success coming into Hamilton.
Yeah, they've won 3 out of 4, and I think, like, I don't think it's an advantage. I don't think there's some sort of way that they match up that just leads you to believe that they've got the advantage because they won 3 out of 4. Same with York, having won 3 out of 4 against Atlético Ottawa over the course of the season. That meant nothing when they played in the playoffs, and I think it means nothing here. The only thing that it does lead you to believe is at least Atlético Ottawa believes they can beat this Forge team. If it was the other way around, if they had struggled beating Forge and just with the pedigree that they have, then it might have been an advantage for the home side. But I honestly think you throw out what happened in the regular season out. I mean, especially the last game, Forge wasn't playing for anything. There was another game where, you know, they were coming off an emotional game in the Canadian Championship midweek and played Atleti on the weekend. So, you know, that accounts for a couple of wins. The other 2 were split. And again, you know, all the way around, I kind of feel like you throw that out and it feels like a 50-50 game on Saturday.
Who's riding the hot hand for Atlético right now that Forge need to be aware of?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, Ruben Del Campo has been consistent and very good all season long and was one goal off the race for the Golden Boot. I don't know if it's one player that's a hot hand. I think it's a roster that has had, Manny Aparicio and Amir Didic have been excellent all season long. And then you've got players that, maybe were more prevalent in their run in 2022, like Baloo and Ollie Bassett, highly talented players that have been a little bit more up and down this year, but still very capable of being game breakers. We saw it with Ollie last week as he scored on an Olympico right off the corner straight into the net past the York keeper, Francescini. So I feel like there's not one player that's just in tremendous form. It's more about the collective and the fact that they've got a group of players that, look, last year when they went into the year, they were missing a holding midfielder for basically the first half of the season, and they were playing guys out of position. This year, that's not the case, and they're healthy at the right time. No one's missing, so it should be all hands on deck, and we'll see how it plays out.
What are your thoughts, final thing on the CPL here? Because I have heard some confusion, I think, from some. What are your thoughts on the CPL sort of, I guess I'll call it for the better part of a page playoff system that really didn't kind of benefit for Hamilton's Forge FC?
I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I understand what they're saying in terms of rewarding the teams that are best in the regular season, and I'm all for that. But I feel like with a CONCACAF Champions Cup spot, and there's two of them, there's an advantage to finishing first and second anyway. So there's no perfect playoff format. This is the first time they're actually repeating the playoff format year over year, and I know COVID had something to do with that. Honestly, the best playoff format for me is if they can expand by 4 teams, because I think 5 out of 8 is too much. And maybe if you get to 10, you go to 6. I still feel like that's too much. 6 out of 12 would be great, and then you just go 6v3, 5v4, winners play 1 and 2, and a final, 5 playoff games, which I think would be fantastic and straightforward. And if you've already won the league, well, you're going to the CONCACAF Champions Cup anyways. If you finish second in the league, well, you're going to the CONCACAF Champions Cup if the first place team wins the double. So that, to me, should be enough motivation for all the different teams. And look, I think in some ways this format rewards the best teams in the league, but in some ways the number one team, the second year in a row, and we'll see if Forge gets to the final, but we saw it last year with Forge hosting the final against Cavalry when Cavalry easily won the league, and the same could happen this year. Yeah. And to me, if you finish first in the regular season and you're playing a 1-game final, if your league doesn't have that final on a neutral field, you should be hosting it. It shouldn't have to do with the 1v2 playoff game. It should have to do what you did over the course of the 28 games over the course of the season. So that's my opinion. I don't think there's any perfect playoff format, but if you're asking me if I'm a fan or if I'd change it, at least they've given this one 2 years, but honestly, I would change it.
AJ, I share your opinion, straight up. Hey, let's switch over to the Canadian Football League. And, from a Hamilton Tiger Cat standpoint, that goal line stance was unbelievable. How Ante Litre did not get into the end zone at the conclusion of that amazing game. I don't know how many lead changes there was in that game last Friday against the Tiger Cats and Redblacks. But what I will say to you, will those 3 plays, will that be enough of a kind of motivation? They looked pretty fired up when they won that game to carry over into Toronto's match for the East semi-final this weekend. Well,
first off, I can tell you there are a lot more lead changes in that game than the previous 7 because there had been none in the previous 7 games. And Ottawa's 1-6 in those 7 games, and they lost all 6 of those games wire to wire. The one game they won wire to wire was when they pummeled Toronto. They're up 31-3 at the half and hung on 41-27. I do think it's important given the fact that they had lost 5 in a row. There's a reason Bob Dice played his starters right until the end. It was imperative that they found a way to win and got some positive momentum and really wiped the slate clean. Now it feels like the slate is clean and the regular season is done. Had they lost that game, there would have been some lingering baggage from 6 straight defeats. So I do feel like it was important. I think it's important for the offense. In the previous 4 losses to the Toronto game where they made the late comeback, they'd scored 61 points in 4 straight losses. When you look at the last 5 quarters, they've scored 62 points in the last 5 quarters, 37 against Hamilton and 25 against Toronto. And much like a lot of people have said, oh, the garbage time points, who cares? And in most cases, I would say yes. But I think it helped both of these teams. When Toronto was down 31-3 to Ottawa at halftime, Chad Kelly looked terrible, and that was early in his return. And he came back and he threw for a career-high 495. And what did he do after that game? After garbage time points or beatdown points, 4 to 5 wins, all against playoff teams, against BC, Winnipeg, Ottawa, and Montreal. And Chad Kelly has played his best football since that second half against Ottawa. And I truly think this Ottawa team, especially how woeful the offense was. Now, Drew Brown was out injured for a good portion of that and was playing injured for the rest of it. But I think it was important for the offense to go off like they did. And certainly very important that they got the job done.
Injuries have been huge for your club. How healthy are they going into Saturday's game?
Almost as healthy as they can be the rest of the playoffs. There's certain players that aren't coming back this year. Darius Pickett's not coming back this year, which, that's a huge blow. I think he would have been in the mix for Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, he still won Sam Lime. To me, it wasn't even close in terms of, and that's not to say anything about the other players at Sam, but Darius Pickett was that good that even though he missed the last third of the season, he still, I think, ran away probably with that award as the best Sam linebacker in the East. So they miss him. They miss Dino Boyd at left tackle. But and the only player that could be back between now and the Grey Cup that's a starter is Alonzo Adai at safety. He practiced this week on a limited basis, so possibly could come back as early as next week if Ottawa wins this football game. But beyond that, they're as healthy as they've been in a long, long time. And, they're going to need everyone. And for me, when I look at the keys to this game, certainly I think Ottawa's going to score points. And I think Ottawa's going to need to score points. I think they're going to need to score 30 plus. Can they stop Chad Kelly? Can they stop the Argos? They've had one good half against Chad Kelly in 2 years, in 4 starts. He put up 44 and 40 and 38 in the other 3 games, other than the one where he threw the 2 pick sixes. Damon Webb with both of them for Ottawa as the Redblacks jumped out to that 31-3 lead and really cruised to a 41-27 victory. So to me, how do you get in Chad Kelly's head? And I feel like it has to happen early. I think you have to get him out of his comfort zone. I think you have to pressure him and maybe plant a seed of doubt, not only because of what happened this year, but maybe even more importantly, he's got one playoff start and it didn't go very well last year in the East Final against Montreal. So I'm expecting a high-scoring game, and I think it's going to take well into the 30s to win it, which should make for entertaining football and certainly a great game, hopefully, for the neutrals.
I'm telling you, and from a neutral standpoint, I think this is going to be a lot closer game than a lot of people think. And I think the offense and defense are going to cancel each other out. This could come down to a field position game based on what Janarian Grant or what Dudman will do for Ottawa. I think it could come down to special teams. I really do.
And if it does, Bob Dice's units have been near or basically at or near the best in the league since he took over as a special teams coach in 2016. So they've had their struggles late in the season in this losing streak that they had, but they're a lot better the last couple of weeks. And they've got a couple of really important guys. Richie Leone didn't have his best year, But, with Richie in the cover units, he had one of the best seasons in CFL history last year. Lewis Ward is one of the most accurate kickers in CFL history and has 3 game winners to his credit at the death this year. And then you look at, Ottawa's got a 1-2 punch. It's not just Devontae Dedmon, it's Khalil Pimpleton as well. And I think Pimpleton could have a major impact in this football game, both on special teams and on offense. He's a dynamic playmaker, kind of in the true CFL mold of a Pinball Clemens, for example. So a guy that had over 700 yards receiving in just 8 games this year. Wow. And you add to that his return yards and a kick return for a touchdown. And he's one of the most electrifying players in the league. So, yeah, that for me, if Ottawa's going to win this game, I think they're going to have to win the special teams battle. I think if it's a saw-off, I think then Toronto, I still think it's going to be a close game. But if the special teams is a saw-off, it feels to me like Toronto's going to win by somewhere between 3 and 7 points. But we'll see how it plays out. We'll see if they can get a big play. If they can get a big play, like another pick 6 or a big turnover on defense or a big special teams play, that might help swing the game in their favor. I think they're going to need 1 or 2 of those to get the win.
Pick a team. Lions, Riders.
I'm going completely against the grain. I don't even know if I believe it, but I'll pick the upset this week. I'll say Vernon Adams Jr. Gets it done. I picked BC at the start of the year. So when you pick a team at the start of the year, even though you see their flaws, you stick with them. So I'll say, I don't think they're winning 2 in a row. I think Ottawa could win 2 in a row. And I do think Toronto could win the Grey Cup. They might even be my favorite to win the Grey Cup right now.
Wow.
But I feel like it's a wide open league, and I feel like Toronto's got the most pieces and the fewest flaws. But again, a lot of it comes down to what Chad Kelly we're going to see. But I'll pick BC to win this week, and then they'll lose in Winnipeg in the West Final.
AJ, tremendous weekend of soccer, or at least football, for no matter how you want to call it, whether it be the CPL or the CFL. Thank you so much for adding your impact. Say hi to Mr. Avery for me. He's a classic. He's a wonderful, wonderful man, as you well know. We really do appreciate your time, and good luck to both of your teams.
Thanks, Bob. It's always a pleasure.
All right. Take care, my man. Well, that's the Sportsline podcast for the day, and you've just seen and heard we love talking sports. If you do know of an athlete, team, or event to promote, the Sportsline podcast do want to hear from you. Please hit that thumbs up, like, and subscribe button. And if you have something to say, we'd like you to comment. For the wonderful people that make the Sportsline podcast possible to you, thank you so very much, and we'll see you next week.